Before we get into the stories, quick reminder, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss a new scary upload. And hey, if you've got your own creepy story, send it to the email in the description. We might share it in a future video. All right, let's dive into tonight's stories of janitors alone at night. Here's the thing about janitors. Most people never really think about them. During the day, schools, offices, and hospitals are crowded with noise and activity. But when the sun sets and everyone else goes home, that's when janitors show up. Their world is the silence after hours. Dark halls, locked doors, rooms that should be empty. And if you ask them, many will tell you the job comes with stories, creepy ones. Because when you're the only person inside a building at 2 a.m., every flicker of light, every strange noise feels amplified. What's worse, sometimes it's not just your imagination. Think about it. Schools are filled with history. Every classroom, every locker has seen years of students come and go. Offices hold their own secrets, people stressed, working late, leaving pieces of themselves behind. And hospitals, well, those walls have witnessed more life and death than we can ever imagine. If any place were to hold energy, good or bad, it would be those. Now, picture this. You're pushing a mop bucket down a long hallway. The floor squeaks beneath your shoes. Your only soundtrack is the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzing above. You know you're supposed to be alone. You should be alone. But then you hear it. Footsteps. Not yours. Slow, heavy, coming from the far end of the hall. You stop. The sound stops. You move again, and there it is, the echo of someone else moving in sync with you. You glance over your shoulder, heart racing, but the corridor is empty. No one there. And yet, somehow you feel eyes on you. That's why janitor stories hit different. They're not about being chased through the woods or finding something in the attic. They're about being trapped in a place you thought you knew. A school, an office, a hospital. Places we walk through every day without fear. But at night, those same places transform into something else entirely. Some janitors talk about hearing voices, murmurs drifting down stairwells, conversations happening in rooms that were locked hours ago. Others see figures, shadows crossing hallways, shapes reflected in windows when no one should be outside. And the scariest part? Sometimes the camera footage backs them up. It's not just tired minds playing tricks. Something is really there. So tonight, we're going to share a few of these stories. Real accounts from janitors who worked the graveyard shift and discovered they weren't as alone as they thought they were. These are tales passed around a campfire. These are the kinds of experiences that stick with people for life. The kind that makes them quit their job, change their routine, or refuse to ever step foot in the same building again. Because at the end of the day, cleaning floors isn't what makes the job scary. It's the silence. It's the shadows. It's realizing that while you're sweeping, mopping, or taking out the trash, something or someone might be watching. Ready? Let's start with the first story. Most schools feel creepy after dark. The lights are off, the halls echo, and every sound feels louder than it should. But for one janitor, working in a middle school basement turned into something unforgettable. He had just finished cleaning the classrooms upstairs and went down to grab supplies. The basement was always colder, with pipes hissing and shadows stretching across the walls. As he unlocked the supply closet, he heard footsteps. Slow, careful, coming from the far end of the hall. He called out, thinking maybe a teacher had stayed late. No answer. The footsteps stopped. He kept cleaning. But then the sound returned. This time closer, heavy, like boots dragging against the concrete floor. When he finally looked up, he froze. At the end of the hallway, there was a figure, too tall to be a student, too thin to be a teacher, just standing, half in the dark, watching. The janitor dropped the mop, ran upstairs, and refused to ever go into the basement alone again. To this day, he swears those footsteps still echo in his head. Here's the part he never told the school board, but shared years later with a friend. The basement wasn't just creepy, it felt wrong. Every time he had to go down there, his skin prickled, like the air itself was charged. The walls were lined with old storage boxes, outdated textbooks, broken desks, forgotten trophies from decades past, all stacked in uneven rows, creating little pathways that looked almost like tunnels. Once you stepped deep enough, you could barely hear the world upstairs anymore. That night, after hearing the first set of footsteps, he tried to convince himself it was nothing. Maybe just the building settling, or an animal scurrying through the vents. He forced himself to focus, wringing out the mop, telling himself not to let his imagination take over. But the sound came back, louder, measured, not random creaks. It was the steady rhythm of someone walking and getting closer. The janitor's hands shook so badly he dropped his keys. The sound of metal hitting the floor echoed down the long hallway like a warning bell. That's when he realized whatever was out there had stopped moving again. It was listening. He held his breath, crouched to pick up the keys, and told himself, "Don't look, don't give it attention." But curiosity is cruel. Against his better judgment, he glanced up. That's when he saw it. A figure, tall, thin, almost stretched. It stood at the very edge of the light, its body swallowed by shadow, but its head tilted just slightly, as if studying him. The janitor swears the figure didn't move like a person. It didn't shift its weight. It didn't breathe. It just existed, like a shape cut out of the darkness itself. He blinked, hoping it was his tired eyes playing tricks. But when his vision cleared, it was still there, still watching. Panic took over. He abandoned the mop, the bucket, everything. Sprinting up the stairs, he could feel the temperature drop behind him, like the air was being pulled out of the hallway. He didn't stop until he burst into the main floor, where the faint glow of the exit signs felt like salvation. He never reported it officially. How could he? Who would believe that a basement had something waiting in the shadows? But his co-workers noticed. From then on, he refused every assignment that required him to go downstairs alone. If anyone asked why, he'd laugh it off, saying he was done with that cold basement. But the truth was written on his face every time the topic came up. He was scared. Deep down, he knew what he saw wasn't his imagination.
Years later, when he no longer worked at the school, he returned for a reunion event. Walking through the building brought back old memories, but when someone suggested checking out the basement, he refused, flat out. His hands went pale and he shook his head. No, that place isn't safe. He never explained further. The creepiest detail is, after he quit, other staff started mentioning odd experiences in the same basement. A substitute janitor heard whispers when he was locking up supplies. A teacher swore she saw a shadow move across the stairwell when she stayed late grading. Even the security guard admitted he avoided checking the cameras that pointed toward the basement hallway. Every time he looked, there was static. Only on those feeds, nowhere else in the building. To this day, no one can explain what the janitor saw that night. But he insists on one thing. It wasn't just footsteps. It wasn't just the building settling. Something was there. Something that watched. And once you notice it, you can't forget it. That's why he still hears the sound sometimes, even years later. Not in the basement anymore, but in his dreams. That slow, heavy rhythm of boots dragging across concrete, following him down endless halls that never seemed to end.
A janitor working in a downtown office thought his night shifts would be easy. Just empty cubicles and computer screens glowing in standby mode. But one night, around 3 a.m., he heard a phone ring. Not unusual, except all the lines had been disconnected years earlier. He followed the sound, weaving through cubicles until he reached a desk phone flashing red. The caller ID just said, "Unknown." When he picked up, the line was dead, just static. But over the static, he heard something faint, breathing, slow, deep. He hung up fast and backed away. But here's where it gets worse. As he turned to leave, every single computer screen in the row lit up. One by one. Each monitor showing the exact same thing, the hallway camera feed. And in the center of the hallway was him, standing there, watching himself. He ran straight out of the building and never came back for a night shift again. Here's the part he admitted later, after he quit. The office had always felt a little strange at night. During the day, it was filled with noise, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, conversations buzzing. But after midnight, it felt hollow. The sound of his footsteps echoed too loudly. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed heavier than normal, and even the shadows looked sharper, like they were cut into the walls. He tried to ignore it, but the silence had a way of pressing down on him. That night, the ringing phone wasn't just unexpected, it was wrong. He knew the building's phone system had been shut down years earlier. The cords were literally cut, yet the shrill, mechanical ring echoed through the cubicles like it was alive. Each step he took toward it made him hesitate, but curiosity pulled him forward. When he saw the caller ID, just unknown, he felt his stomach twist. He answered anyway. At first nothing, just static. Then the breathing started. Slow, deep, deliberate. Like someone was standing inches away from the receiver, refusing to speak. He slammed the phone down, his pulse hammering in his ears. But that wasn't the end.
He barely took 2 steps before the glow of the screens caught his eye. One by one, they turned on, row after row of monitors flickering to life. No programs, no desktops, just the grainy feed of the security cameras. At first, he thought maybe the system had reset itself, but then he realized every screen was showing the exact same angle, the hallway just outside the office. And in that hallway was him, standing there, watching himself. For a moment, he couldn't move. His brain refused to process what he was seeing. How could he be in 2 places at once? The figure on the screens tilted its head, almost like it was aware of him. That tiny movement was enough to break him. He bolted for the exit, his mop and supplies abandoned. Outside, the night air felt thin. He didn't stop running until he reached his car. His hands shook so badly he struggled to fit the key into the ignition. When the engine finally roared to life, he floored it, refusing to look back at the glowing office windows. He drove home with the radio blasting just to drown out the silence, but the image of those screens burned in his mind. After that night, he refused all night shifts. He swapped schedules, took pay cuts, anything to avoid being in that building past sunset. Eventually, he quit altogether. But the story didn't end there. Months later, he got a message from a former coworker. Someone else had taken over his shift, and they too had reported strange things. Computers turning on by themselves, faint whispers in empty conference rooms, and the echo of phones ringing that weren't connected. One guard swore he saw movement on the cameras, a figure walking the halls. When he zoomed in, it wasn't an intruder. It looked like the janitor, the same man who had quit. But the strangest part, the janitor had never been back in the building. To this day, he wonders if he really ran away that night, or if some part of him got left behind, still wandering those cubicles after 3 a.m., waiting for the phone to ring again.
Hospitals are already creepy at night. Empty corridors, the smell of disinfectant, the buzz of fluorescent lights. But a janitor cleaning a closed wing of an old hospital discovered something far worse. He was mopping their patient rooms when he heard a crash, like a bed rolling. But this wing was supposed to be completely empty. He checked the rooms one by one. All of them were vacant, except room 304. The door was half open. Inside, the bed was moved, pressed against the wall, and lying across it was the impression of a person, like someone had just been there. The sheets sunk, as if weight was pressing down, but the bed was empty. Then he heard it, a voice, weak, whispering, calling his name. He dropped everything and sprinted down the hall. Later, he learned that room 304 had once been used for long-term patients. The last person who stayed there, they had died in the bed he saw. That night had started like any other. The janitor had been given the job of working in the hospital's oldest wing, a section that had been shut down for years except for storage and the occasional deep cleaning. The hospital itself was still busy, with doctors and nurses rushing around the newer floors, but this wing was different. Cold, silent, forgotten. He pushed his cart through the dimly lit hallways, the wheels squeaking against the tile floor. Every sound bounced around too loudly, his mop swishing, his keys jangling, even his own breathing. The fluorescent lights above flickered every so often, buzzing like angry insects. He kept telling himself it was just an old building. Pipes shift, lights flicker, rooms creak, nothing more. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. When he heard that crash, his heart stopped. It didn't sound like a broom falling or a random thud. It was deliberate, heavy, like a bed rolling across the floor. His first thought was, someone had broken in. But who would want to break into a hospital wing that hadn't been used in years? He grabbed his flashlight and followed the sound. Room by room he checked, all empty. Chairs stacked in corners, dust on the window sills. Some rooms still had old beds, their sheets covered in plastic. Others were completely bare. But when he reached room 304, he froze. The door was cracked open, just enough for a shadow to spill out into the hall. He pushed it slowly, the hinges groaning. Inside, the air felt heavier, colder. The bed had been moved, not centered like the others. It sat pressed against the far wall, like someone had dragged it there. And on the mattress, he saw it, an impression, clear as day, the dip of a head, the curve of shoulders, legs stretched out, the sheets pressed flat, as if someone invisible was still lying there. He blinked his eyes, rubbed them, but it didn't change. The bed was empty, yet the impression remained. His throat went dry. He backed away, his mop slipping from his hand. And that's when it happened. A voice, weak, raspy, whispering his name. Not shouted, not random, his name. He knew he hadn't imagined it because it came from the direction of the bed. He turned for just a second, and the sheets shifted, like weight lifting off him. That was it. He bolted. His cart clattered behind him as he sprinted down the corridor, his footsteps echoing in the hollow space. He didn't stop until he was back in the main wing, where the lights were bright and people were moving. His coworker said he looked pale, shaken, like he'd just seen a ghost. He refused to explain. He just clocked out early and went home. A few days later, curiosity got the better of him. He mentioned room 304 to a nurse he trusted. She looked at him strangely, then told him something he wished he had never asked. That room had a history. Years ago, it was used for long-term patients, people who had nowhere else to go, who spent their final months staring at the ceiling of that very room. The last patient in room 304 was an elderly man. He had no family, no visitors. Nurses said he often called out for people by name, sometimes even staff he'd never met. He died in that bed, alone. And the impression of a body the janitor saw, that's exactly where he took his final breath. The janitor never worked that wing again. Even if management asked, he found excuses, traded shifts, anything to avoid going back. But every time he walked past the entrance to the old hallway, he swore he could feel eyes on him, watching, waiting, as if someone or something from room 304 hadn't quite left.
So, what do you think? Would you ever work a night shift in a school, an office, or a hospital again? Or would you find a day job real quick? Because honestly, after hearing stories like these, it makes you wonder just how many strange things happen when the rest of the world is asleep. Most people never see it, never hear it, But janitors, security guards, and overnight workers, they're the ones who witness the shadows, the footsteps, and the things that don't make sense. It's almost like the night has its own set of rules. Places you know so well during the day suddenly feel different when the lights are dim and the halls are empty. And maybe that's why these stories hit so hard, because deep down, we all know how it feels to be alone in the dark, questioning every sound. Don't forget, if you liked these stories, hit that like button and subscribe. And if you've got your own scary story, email it to us. We might feature it in the next video. More terrifying night shift stories are on the way. Until then, stay safe and keep the lights on.